everyone. My name is Chris Hood. I am a digital engagement lead and a transformational strategist with Google Cloud and Apigee. My email address is right here for you. Please feel free, jot it down, chrishood@google.com. Let me know if there is anything I can do to help you. If I don't get to your particular questions here today, or if I don't cover topics that you are interested in, then please feel free to reach out to me. Let me know how I can help. But for now, you've got that. We will have time at the end of the webinar for you to be able to ask some questions. As we progress, feel free to ask the questions and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And again, if I don't get to your particular question, here's my email. Reach out to me. Let me know how I can help. Here's a big marketing slide for you. Apigee is in a lot of different industries. For those of you on today that may be new to Apigee, I wanted to at least share this quickly so that you have an understanding of who some of our customers are, and more specifically, the leaders who have actually digitally transformed their business through Apigee. That's really what today's conversation is all going to be about. In each of these companies, there was somebody who took the initiative to say, we need to do something different. We need to build an API program, and we want to do that with Apigee. And so we're going to talk today about how leaders have done this and what are some of the steps that they've taken. We're going to use some of these companies as examples today so that you can see what it takes for leaders to drive successful API programs. I also wanted to mention a tool that we use to help assess your business and how digitally mature your business is. Apigee Compass measures your company's capabilities across 10 different dimensions of digital transformation. So over the last 2 years or so, we've accumulated best practice data from thousands of companies, and we've put all of that into this tool that you can take. The address is right there, compass.apigee.com. Feel free to go to it. You can go to it after the webinar today. It's free, fill it out, and see how digitally mature your organization is. One of the pieces or one of the 10 dimensions in Compass is actually leadership. Another one is funding. We're going to see how those are tied together. But today we're going to talk about leadership and show you a little bit more about how that fits into Compass as well. So in Compass, the primary question that we ask is this: who is leading your API-first efforts? And the options for you to select, you can pick one. We have a few API evangelists with some following, but no explicit executive support. We have champions, and some of our IT teams have formally committed to an API first. Many business leaders within our organization are driving their products and services with an API first approach, or our CIO, CTO, CEO has mandated an API-first digital transformation. So I'm going to reveal in just a moment what the recommended answer is here. But think for a moment, how would you answer this? What do you think is happening currently in your business? Hopefully you are all here because you are interested in improving your existing API programs. Maybe you don't have an API program. That's great. Good reason to be here as well. Or maybe you're just looking for information on Apigee so that you can help digitally transform your organization. All of that's great. APIs are leading digital transformation today. Accepting this is the key for analyzing what you need to do to help connect with your consumers. APIs are helping companies create new connected experiences. They help enterprises be more agile and meet consumer demands more quickly. And of course, APIs open up new business models, allowing the company to collaborate with partners or even monetize those digital assets. So we're going to cover a few of those examples today as well. So here's the answer. How do we make this happen? Your CIO, CTO, or CEO has mandated an API-first digital transformation. Change should be driven from the top, supported by a clear vision for creating value via connected experiences and improving operational efficiency. So if you're adopting an API platform to help your company jumpstart those digital types of capabilities, true transformation requires not only those new technologies, but also the business models, the marketing tactics and processes to make it all happen. And the only people really that can help you make that happen are your leaders, your executives. So where do we start in all of this? Here's a couple of quick bullet points to kind of summarize how leaders can make successful API programs. For instance, looking at examples of successful API programs outside of your company. I mean, we all do that, right? Let's see who else is doing something and try to mimic it. And again, we're going to show you some examples of that soon. You can build momentum and credibility by choosing projects that can provide immediate business value, right? Again, through this API-first approach, you can use these projects as a foundation for scaling the API-first practices. And of course, we always have to leverage data and an outside-in strategy to generate what our consumers are demanding. But then what? These are really the areas that we are going to focus on today. You need to first formally commit to an API-first approach. We're going to tackle that one, okay? Adjust operational models to encourage adoption of best practices. Systematically provide incentives to accelerate API-first adoption. Align a strong funding model with your leadership for digital transformation. And of course, align efforts with outcomes via API consumption metrics. We're going to dive into all of these today. The deliberate action of working on a digital culture is one of the best things a leader can do. I actually said that. I think it's pretty smart, but it really is true. In today's world, it is all about building a digital culture that not only is going to help transform your organization, but it's going to meet the demands of your consumers. That's really what this is all about. So let's look at that first. API-first approach. Let's break this down a little bit. Like, what really is API-first? It's really the number one item in establishing your ability to meet the demands of consumers. I'm going to demonstrate that. First, we look at understanding the overall process of how digital products and experiences will flow from consumers to your back-end systems. We call this the digital value chain. So it flows from how your consumers engage with your business through digital experiences that are produced by developers who are consuming the APIs of your organization. And those APIs are produced by an API team. And that API team is working directly with your back end to produce all of that data and all of those experiences that flow back to the consumer. This is completely different than how most people look at it, where you simply try to expose some of your back-end data, or you have data and you say, hey, let's give this to our consumers, when in fact, those consumers may not even need it or even want it. So that's what we call the outside-in approach. We go from the outside, starting with the consumer, and we move towards the inside, towards your back end. The reverse of that, of course, is the inside-out approach, which is we work on the inside, our back end, and we flow that information out to our consumers. We want to focus solely on the outside-in approach. But what is API first? A better definition might be something like this. API first is an executive directive that establishes a clear vision for using APIs to generate business value, improve operational efficiency, and drive digital evolution through new products and digital experiences. In fact, the entire point of an API-first model is to say that you will build APIs or find APIs that accomplish these business objectives before considering all other options. Does that make sense? At least that's a foundation for us to start looking at this deeper. The reality is, or the challenge for leaders, is that in most cases, this will require a shift in your culture. But successful digital companies are willing and able to make this shift with leadership direction. Also, leaders have to be able to align both the IT groups and the business groups to create winning API programs. You can't do it alone. You can't do it in silos. You can't just hand this to your IT team and say, integrate APIs without any understanding of what the business strategy is going to be. Nor can you implement a business strategy without having your IT involved in that process. Bringing these two groups together and aligning both will help you make successful API programs and build your API-first approach. So what can a pizza company tell us about digital transformation, and more specifically about an API-first culture? Domino's. Anybody like Domino's Pizza? I see some more hands waving. Yes? Excellent. So Domino's Pizza is one of the largest pizza companies in the world. They have over 16,000 stores in 85 different countries. In 2018, they grossed $13.5 billion in sales. Pretty good, right? Did you also know that Domino's was the 2018 Tech Accelerator of the Year? They have 15 different digital ordering services, and 65% of sales are done via digital ordering channels. I actually visited the Domino's office, and when you walk into their headquarters, in their main room, there's a big sign, and that sign says, "We are a technology company." That's right, Domino's considers themselves a technology company that just so happens to sell pizza. Domino's Pizza CEO Patrick Doyle has been talking about being a tech company that sells pizza for years. And in reality, becoming the #1 pizza company in the world was a direct result of focusing on technology, and more specifically, APIs to produce new channels and business opportunities. The Domino's Anywhere platform, which we see a picture here, is a suite of connected devices that enable customers to order pizza literally anywhere on their favorite devices. So by changing the culture at Domino's to focus on APIs and mandating those APIs, in other words, APIs first, their leader was able to catapult the business to a completely new level. And if you look at Domino's sales from roughly 2014 to 2019, you will see a dramatic change over the last few years solely dedicated to APIs. Yes, they are a pizza company. They consider themselves a technology company that sells pizza because they have enabled their customers to order and receive pizzas in new and unique ways. All make sense? API first. Domino's is not only a great example of how to embrace an API-first structure, but it also demonstrates how they have leveraged APIs to introduce new operational and business models. Successful digital companies treat APIs as products. So no different than we may manage all other types of software or applications, digital products, or even physical products like pizza. Within your business, APIs should be managed as products with their own product lifecycle. So as an example here, we see a product lifecycle that could consist of a design phase. We document those APIs, market them to bring those API products to life so that consumers can find them and use them, and the commitment to analyze those APIs, the usage allowing us to then iterate on them and to improve them, all in the name of meeting the demands of our consumers. So if a consumer is saying, hey, I would really like to order a pizza on my Google Home, we should be thinking, well, how do we create an API for that? And we do that again as API products. Just like we saw with the Domino's example, their Anywhere platform is basically a suite of API products that they manage as products. You also need to build the right team. Leaders who will put teams together should aim to adopt that outside-in mindset and agile software development processes so that you can produce APIs and build API products. The team itself should feel empowered to start building APIs rapidly, and as the core team builds up experience with APIs, they should then train other teams, other business units, all while growing that API-first culture. Meanwhile, the leaders should shield the API team, right? They shouldn't need to deal with things like constraints on funding or existing service governance, right? This allows that team to focus primarily on what it needs to do, which is create and deliver highly consumable APIs that will help you build digital experiences for consumers that they expect. Another way we can look at this is through, we just mentioned governance. How about creating a virtual team that helps your architects set standards with representation from different business units and different API teams that are, wrapped around security and your architecture, again, governance, any standards or regulations that you have in place. You can do this through a center of excellence. You can do this through any number of different ways, but a virtual API committee can also help you. Not only help you in supporting your governance, but also help you in adopting the API program and growing that API-first culture. Remember, or at least what we try to establish, is that the goal of API governance is to manage risk while still being able to enable speed to market. By focusing on things like principles and standards and empowering teams to be able to produce APIs, we are not getting to market faster at the sake of risk. We are actually managing that risk through things like, say, continuous integration and continuous delivery, releasing continuously but still with automated testing that can validate against your governance that is set forth by like that virtual team. All making sense? This is all part of what leaders must do to, again, drive successful teams which meet the demands of consumers. Another thing that you can implement is an agile framework. We know that having agile allows organizations to be more nimble, which again allows you to get things out to consumers more rapidly. A lot of buzzwords in there, But, this is kind of a picture of what that might look like. And ultimately, again, there at the bottom, the CI/CD program allows you to automate this, and you can go live whenever you need. Continually being able to produce APIs that deliver digital experiences. So Pitney Bowes provides mailing and shipping support services to clients in the retail and e-commerce types of markets. The Apigee API platform helped Pitney Bowes develop and launch its Commerce Cloud platform, which helps connect customers to additional Pitney Bowes shipping, logistics, and intelligence services. So this ultimately helped Pitney Bowes reduce time to market for new features from 18 to 4 months. And it encouraged customer engagement, and it simplified the process so that they can deploy new features, and move to a cloud infrastructure quickly. There's a good quote down here from the Director of Technology Strategy that you can read. I don't have to read it for you. But it's an example, again, of how the leaders within Pitney Bowes have helped accelerate time to market by changing their business model. We also want to be able to accelerate adoption. It's great to be able to get 1 or 2 people within your organization to wrap their heads around an API-first culture, or even a business unit to embrace it and to carry that forward. But how do you then adopt that? How do you get that mentality shared throughout the organization? How did Domino's get the entire organization to wrap their heads around being a technology company? Other than having a leader that mandates that, you also need some additional support. One way we can do that is actually through developers. If developers are building those digital experiences and applications for your organization, and they like the APIs, and they like what they're able to build with your APIs, then they are going to also self-promote those APIs. They become additional lines of marketing for you. And ultimately, they will help adopt and grow that API-first culture within your organization. We can create great developer experiences through enabling things like self-service, being able to get to hello API, hello world within your APIs as quickly as possible, making it easy to understand, have documentation, have sample code, also supplying feedback loops. So how do those developers communicate back to your API team if something isn't working or if they like something? And once again, use metrics. Metrics is going to be a common theme here today because metrics are what leaders look at to understand what is happening. There's no difference here. We want to know and understand how your APIs are being consumed by developers. So it only makes sense that we track that. You also want to begin thinking like a marketer. We have this concept of 5 E's of engagement: excite, empower, entrust, engage, enable. So this is like a funnel. It works just like a funnel. If I have a developer portal where I'm producing or distributing my APIs, and I have developers coming to this developer portal to get my APIs, have we excited them enough about what they are able to do with the APIs? Do we know what the anonymous developers are doing? Have they come in and are they able to play with things a little bit? And if they like it, do they then register? Do we empower them with an API key so that they can, do a little bit more with the APIs? And then those who actually have a key, do we entrust them to be able to produce an app? And how do we engage with them so that as they produce those apps, they begin to publish those apps or submit them for consideration? And then once they have published them, do we enable those developers to extend that out to other developers and share their app with people and share their experiences so that we can ultimately help adopt and grow our API program? You may also have what we call an API evangelist support your community. So an API evangelist is really, again, it's a community support marketing type of person who aligns themselves with leadership and the API consumers and the application developers. We have a whole list here of different types of things that they can do to help evangelize internally as well as externally. Leadership support for producing or sponsoring events or hosting dev jams or building prototypes of things. It starts with leadership support. But an evangelist and through the API team, again, you can grow that program and you can support the goals and the objectives of the organization through the program using different types of evangelistic processes. A good example of that is AccuWeather. So AccuWeather is the world's leading weather media and big data company, serving nearly 2 billion people and more than 30 billion API requests a day. So it's a weather partner, right? And what was interesting about AccuWeather is that once they set up their dev portal to release their APIs, through having an evangelist working with a community, they had over 6,500 developers sign up for their program in 2 months. And nearly 2,500 developers created API keys within those 2 months. You don't get those types of numbers by just releasing a dev portal and putting it out there. You need leaders and evangelists to help you make that happen. And again, some more great quotes. Feel free to read those. Take a screenshot if you want. Funding models. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We're going to talk, I'll share with you some additional resources here in a moment. But as you can start to see, hopefully, APIs are not about IT. They are about business. We know that while developing shared APIs inside IT is definitely growing in popularity, traditional project-based or siloed integration approaches remain the rule, but not the exception. Much of IT's budgets and efforts go to paying back technical debt and maintaining legacy assets that were designed to gracefully expose data and business logic. While these are valid reasons, and most of you on this call probably understand that, APIs have a much, much larger impact than IT. APIs can fundamentally transform the business. If you are in an executive or working with executives on digital strategies, you've got to understand that the business has to be the one that transforms. A few core principles out of that: individual project-based funding does not work, and successful API programs are funded at a program level. If necessary, the program can be funded by multiple business units. Here's an example of a project-based funding: Project A, Project B, Project C, the funding, the timeline, and you'll see that there are clearly funding gaps. So when we go into an organization and we see that, hey, our API program, or we'll say our API project, has been funded, well, that typically means it's only been funded for a period of time. And then they either renew that or they move that to another business unit, and then it's another project, and you've got these gaps. And for each one of these gaps, you potentially have a loss in revenue. That's the fact. What we would rather see is something program-based, where over time you are investing in things like your developer portal, onboarding of developers, your training, enablement, your governance, your support, building common reusable APIs, your API platform license, in which case at no point in time should you be worried about the project. You should be worried about, from an outside-in perspective, what are you building to meet your consumers' needs? And that evolves, and that changes. In a project-based model, you have one shot, basically, to make that all work. In a program-based model, you have all time, in theory, to make that work. And I see some questions coming through, which is good. We'll get to those. So there is a business case, right? You could do nothing. That's fine. There's a lot of people out there that do nothing. Or you can identify the business value in the API program. You can fund a platform like Apigee to help you strategically invest in that platform to produce digital experiences. You can fund product teams, API product teams that will help you produce these experiences, and recognize there's always uncertainty. Digital disruption brings uncertainty. Digital transformation is uncertainty. But leaders who understand this and drive API first have the most ability to keep that disruption and uncertainty at a minimum, and then avoid some of these API funding pitfalls. Again, I'm not going to really dive into this. Here they are real quick. Fund APIs at the project level, which we just talked about. Boil the ocean. Avoid funding enterprise IT-driven programs, right, that simply expose services, or expect teams to innovate in bureaucracy. You can't do that. Or ultimately, no executive sponsorship. You need leaders to support this. So all of this, from a funding perspective, funding your API program, was actually last month's webinar as part of this series. Here's a link to that. It's in the resources for the webinar today. Feel free to take a screenshot, quickly type it into a browser if you want. This is an entire webinar solely focused on funding your API program. Highly recommend that you, like I said, click on the link and go look at this, and you can do that later today or at your leisure. So I only touched on a small piece of that, but the key here, again, is that leaders must fund an API program, and leaders must be aligned with that funding so that you can digitally transform and be successful. That's what Domino's did. That's what a lot of these other companies have done. As an example, Swisscom, which is a leading telecommunications provider in Switzerland. They provide phone, internet, other services to millions of customers. So Swisscom established an API program using Apigee to bridge its network and resources to outside apps and products. And with that, they generate millions in revenue now through Apigee's API programs. They're producing 20% annual growth in API calls post the migration. So if you want to grow like Domino's, like Swisscom, consider APIs. Okay, consumption metrics. Here's our digital value chain again. Whatever direction you take, the first step is to establish KPIs for your API program. Connect those enterprise metrics to your digital experiences. So throughout this digital value chain, you can measure the velocity at which digital experiences are created. And there's probably, we're actually going to touch real quickly here on different types of metrics that you might consider. But through this, you can, kind of balance between the value of those experiences and the speed to market through which you are traveling across this digital value chain. We have another thing called two-speed IT, which means basically your back-end development typically can moves very slow, and your front-end development typically moves very fast. You can build a mobile application quicker than you can update your back-end services to support that mobile application. In the middle, we have APIs. APIs allows you to bridge that gap between those different speeds. You can support the needs of your mobile apps and digital experiences more quickly by having APIs that are already communicating with your backend without worrying about your backend being updated. And we do that, again, through Apigee. So we measure and track this, right? Across your API program's maturity, we can look at things like execution, number of APIs that you're producing, number of developers that you have, the speed of your APIs, the quality of your APIs. We can look at how that impacts business, direct revenue from APIs, the breadth of business, cost reduction, speed to onboard, growth of traffic. We can also look at adoption, number of apps that we've produced, say the number of apps in the last 2 months, the number of partners that we have, the number of customers that we have, the number of customers that we have acquired through those applications. And you can also track any number of analytics against your APIs. All of that is within Apigee, but it also allows you to understand how to evolve and grow your API program. Here's another example, T-Mobile. And in this, they show kind of how their analytics progressed. So in 2013, T-Mobile became one of our customers. And you can see that the moment that they introduced Apigee into their environment, they became 67% faster with issue resolution. Their development process went from months to daily app releases. And of course, they've got physical servers. They were able to reduce those physical servers by 1,000 plus. And you can see, again, their subscription services, how that has evolved over time. Again, primarily contributed to Apigee and primarily contributed to executive leadership who made the decision to look at a long-term strategy of digital transformation. And then one more example for you is Telenor. Same thing. They were able to bring in Apigee, and year over year revenue has increased through monetization of resources and APIs. And they specifically are focused on API innovation through a developer portal to help them grow opportunities and reach new markets. And once again, this is all because a leader within their organization supported the need for evolving their digital strategies. So how does your business rank? We go back to Apigee, Compass, and again, as I said, in Compass, there is a section here on leadership. We talked about the questions earlier. I gave you the optimal answer for that question. But really, this is the point leaders begin to execute on their vision. This section will determine if the organization is fully aligned around your leadership approach, around your funding, and around your metrics. So again, go to compass.apigee.com, see how you scale, how you perform in your digital maturity at your organization. And with that, let's answer some questions. Do you suggest a separate API team or a center of excellence with API developers on the various app development teams? That's a good question. So two things real quick. First one is we did a webinar a couple of months ago on API teams that also covers this question. I don't have the link readily available, but if you want to email me real quick, again, chrishood@google.com, I will send you the link to the video and webinar recording for API teams. So that's the first one. You're going to get the best answer by just watching that webinar. But we typically do recommend that you have a separate API team. And that API team through either a center of excellence or through a community of practice or through something, can then leverage those APIs across all of your other app development teams. And this is one of the big questions that come up when I speak with leadership, is they say, what type of organization do I need to have in place? And, what's my head count? Who do I need to bring in? And so there are different approaches to building that team, but typically a team that is dedicated to API development would be recommended best practice. That's not to say that you couldn't have API developers sitting on your app development teams that are specifically building APIs for that app. The key in that is that if you have individual, or I'll even call them siloed teams of API developers on individual app development teams, there is the potential that they are building duplicate APIs. And what you want to prevent is having duplicate APIs. You want to have a repository, a library of APIs that all of your app developers can find and reuse. So that's the only reason why we tend to recommend a separate API team. Let's see, next here. We have a team, or TAMN, is that team or TAM? Of 4 API developers, I'm going to say team, 4 API developers, and have web product that has 600 business screens. How would Apigee help to make my product and team deliver product more quickly? So again, Apigee as a gateway, as an API gateway, allows you to produce APIs which have a lot of different functionalities. There's policies, security, aspects to it. And you can produce those APIs and then launch those APIs on like a developer portal that can be self-served. So developers can come in, they can register for a key, they can find the APIs that they need, they can integrate those APIs into your products. And in theory, that whole process becomes quicker. And as a result, you can then deliver your products more quickly. It's because everything is self-contained for you in a box that allows you to produce what you need faster. That's the short answer. There's probably a lot more to that. Hopefully that answers that, though. Okay, another one here. Any industry standardization group on API strategy? Apigee is any part of that. Any industry standardization group in your... So I want to say yes, if I'm understanding you correctly. What we do see a lot of what we call API governance. And within API governance, that could be industry standards or any type of regulations that you have to follow. And so you can build policies that meet whatever those standards are. So the very high level answer is, if you have API governance in place with automated testing against that governance, you would then meet whatever your specific industry standards are. That's how Apigee can help. Okay? Here's another one. We want to create a sandbox area and perhaps a sample app for devs to try out our APIs. Do you have a recommended best practice or tools for that? That's a great question, and yes, absolutely. So we do often recommend that you set up an environment that you can call sandbox. All of the APIs that you produce and release on the API developer portal could be set up or configured in a way that only do very limited types of functionality. That allows, say, anonymous developers to log in and try out those APIs without having access to everything. We showed you an example earlier of AccuWeather. If you actually go to AccuWeather, they have a good example of that. So you can go to, I think it's developer.accuweather.com. And you can go look at that and see an example of like a try it out sandbox type of thing with other types of monetization options. And you'll see in those monetization options for AccuWeather that as you purchase more packages, the functionality and access to their APIs increases. So very good question and very common, so yes. Okay, and I have one more here. I think I only have time for one more, so I'll get to this real quick. Should leaders focus more on selling vision for your growth, revenue, or cost reduction and efficiency, and how should they be prioritized to reach an MVP or a minimal viable product? So basically kind of the leadership decision between balancing revenue and growth and efficiency and time to market and all that kind of thing. My answer on that would be basically, that's definitely where APIs come in, right? This is about really a long-term strategy. When we talked about program level funding, we established that as being something that is not done in buckets of time, right? I think most leaders who look at a vision of long-term growth and don't try to tackle every single thing that has to happen today are the ones that are more successful. And I say that because it's going to take you time to shift your culture to this API type of mentality. But if your long-term strategy is we are going to build an API program and we are going to digitally transform our business and change our operating models to support API first so that we can build new digital experiences faster, that may take some time for you. But the end result is revenue growth, cost reduction, efficiency. That will come over time. So you can basically get all of this. But your long-term strategy needs to be one of how do I build APIs for my long-term success? Hopefully that answered that question for you. Okay, I see a couple more questions coming in. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Once again, feel free to send me an email. My email address, once more, is chrishood@google.com. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer your questions. We will have this entire webinar recorded. We will have that available. We'll share that link to you so that you can come back and listen to this all again or to share it with colleagues. Hopefully it was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate your time and have a great day.